Sweet. So, busy week. I posted the first few episodes yesterday, starting with our initial call, but gradually getting better with these, and now moving on to various specific topics. No, I texted you ahead of time, but today I wanted to talk about personal finance and get your perspective on that, mainly because I go to you for a lot of my financial advice. And I know that it's somewhat of a passion of yours to kind of look into, doing a lot of research on that stuff and kind of nerding out in a bit. So figure I'd go to the subject matter expert.
Oh yeah, subject matter expert. It's always hard hearing that the way you're described. And it's kind of scary to know that I'm giving you financial advice, man. I'm like destroying your life by steering you down the wrong path. Go
that's
party.
That's like your gambling problem.
That's the best advice you can get. Exactly.
Well, it's not your money, right? You get to
cool.
you can test it through me.
Yeah, exactly. Other people's money, man. It's the best kind of money.
True. So I know that you and I had chatted about various retirement vehicles as of recently, and I know that's kind of what sparked this idea for me, because I feel like over the past even 10 years, you and I had always chatted about how personal finance was something that wasn't emphasized quite a bit in school. Do you feel like that's true, at least with your upbringing? It definitely was for mine.
Yeah, I think it's still a problem to this day. I mean, it's really bad, actually. It's like, why do we go through and not teach this essential life skill? I mean, it's like something that everybody's going to use no matter what you decide to do. Even if you want to be a stay-at-home, parent, or whether you want to be the working professional or whatever you want to do, it's like you need to be able to manage your finances. And if you don't, you're going to have a tough time, not only throughout your working career, but then you're going to continually have trouble and then end up retiring with not as much as you would like. And so it's kind of sad. I don't know why they don't talk about this more, but there's actually a lot of people that are trying to fix this. And I've been introduced to some of those people online where they are doing this. And so a lot of people work for nonprofits, and they're really trying to purge like the financial ignorance, I guess, from folks. And it's just one of those taboo topics. It's like people don't like to talk about what they make. That's kind of like if you think about like growing up, if you ask your parents, what do you make? That's like you don't ask your parents what they make. That's a very personal topic. You don't talk about how much you make with everybody, at the dinner table or whatever. And, somebody comes over and they want financial advice. Like, how often do you talk about financial advice with friends? It's just a topic that, I don't know, for some reason is this thing that we don't talk about. We're all supposed to like figure it out on our own. And it's just kind of crazy. It's like, yeah, that needs to be fixed, man.
Yeah, I feel like, or at least with my group of friends or associates, like, talking about your annual wage was always taboo, but let's say some people were using a Roth IRA for retirement, other people were using a 401k. Maybe some people said, oh, well, I only do stocks. Unfortunately, some people say that they do crypto primarily. So I feel like it was always like the annual income people shied away from talking about, but I always felt like people were more open to talking about at least ideas as to what they could do with money for long-term savings.
Yeah, totally. But at the same time, well, so one, people won't talk about like, how much they have, like talking about the amount is always kind of like some kind of secret information. I don't know, maybe we're afraid that how we'll be judged. Maybe we're afraid of, because like once people know how much you have or how much you make, they could be like, hey, well, why doesn't Lee just pay for it? Or if you make too little, it's like, are you feeling like, oh, maybe I'm not worthy to hang out with these guys, or, whatever goes through
like a social stigma tied into it.
To your point. Yeah. But like you said, people will talk about advice and whatnot, but I'll tell you, the thing with that is that most of the time people aren't very familiar with all those financial instruments. They kind of like I don't know, read or watched an Instagram, reel or a TikTok video, and that's kind of their knowledge. I mean, most people don't like to sit down and read about all these financial instruments. It could be boring if you're not into it, and then they're going to mention a lot of things that probably go over most people's heads. So it's like, and these are smart people too. Like, I mean, you could have somebody that's super smart, like technically, could write software or is a business leader running a company that is well respected, a charismatic speaker that goes up and talks in front of an audience. Doesn't matter.
Attorney.
Those people can be very, anybody. Yeah, anybody. And they could be really kind of financially ignorant. And and so the bad thing about that, or the good and the bad, is that you can always hire somebody to help you. So, they have personal finance folks, like financial advisors that you can get. But then if you're not versed on that subject, you don't know what you're getting into. You don't know do they have your best interests at heart? Are they just trying to make some money off of you? Because it's like, you don't know them, they don't know you. And what do people do? They say, hey, I don't know how to find one. So they go, hey, let me talk to this other guy I know that's a attorney. He's a smart guy. He has a lot of money. Let me ask him who he uses for personal finance. And that guy doesn't know about personal finance either. So it's like the blind leading the blind. It's like, this guy's giving me advice on somebody that's ripping him off, but he doesn't know it. And now I'm getting ripped off and I don't know it. It's like, it's just a whole kind of mess, which is why, like, if somebody's giving you advice, like especially finance advice, and it's your money, it's like, I would recommend getting somebody that doesn't have anything to gain by the advice they're giving you. So like, if a lot of the financial advisors out there, what they do is they'll say, hey, invest in this fund. And what they're doing is getting a cut on the back end, and you don't see it. So you're like, oh, I'm not really paying for it, but you are. Unfortunately, you're just not aware of it. So they have these things called fiduciary financial advisors, and they are basically a fee-based advisor, where you pay them like a monthly fee, or you pay them a per usage fee. Like when you call them up, maybe you pay a couple $100 an hour. But if you think about it, the great thing about it is there is no hidden cost, because they are charging you for what they're doing. You're not going to be paying $15,000 a year in hidden fees to talk to this person and have them click a couple buttons in their software that magically distributes your money across whatever portfolio they have.
Yeah, and you're talking about like, so if they were to make like a 1%,
gains nothing.
You're talking like if they were to make a 1%, commission off of it. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, look at $1 million bucks, dude. I mean, take $1 million and you do 1% a year, that comes out to $10,000.
Yeah.
So that's
be nice to make
a
$1
lot of
million
money to be paying every year. I mean, who are you talking to, man? I mean, when you think about when you got millions, and then you got you're paying tens of thousands of dollars at 1% every year for what? For somebody that's just mad. You got, usually the funny thing too is like, unless you're some super wealthy person that or like you have a huge portfolio, like you and me, we call up, let's say Fidelity or whatever, and we're gonna get some guy your age or less, that just graduated college, and hasn't really been exposed to much except for academics.
He's
which
reading
is
the playbook.
Still, I'm not like discrediting that, but it's still, it's like, come on, dude. It's like I've read all this stuff, and it's like, okay. And so it's just kind of like, what am I getting for the tens of thousands of dollars I'm paying this guy? And it's like, come on, this is not cool. And so that's where, like I said, you try to find somebody that is not gaining from the advice they give you, and then you could trust at least a little bit more that they have your best interests at heart. So I would highly recommend, if you ever get a financial advisor, just search on fiduciary.
So I feel like that compares a lot to like my brother Bao, he is a mechanic, right? And most people, they get, when they think about going to a mechanic, they think, oh, well, I don't want this guy to rip me off. I don't want to go in for one, part to get fixed, and all of a sudden they are going to charge me on something else. So I always felt that it was great growing up because I had someone that I trusted who wasn't making money one way or another on me and can help say, okay, well, here's what I would do. And they didn't have that, that almost commission breath is what we call it in sales. But that's almost similar to what you're saying, where if you're an adult and you're looking for some sort of financial advice, be careful with who you talk to, because someone could be selling something to you or trying to make a profit and potentially, steering you in a direction that isn't in your best interest in some ways, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So I would, as much as possible, go the fiduciary route. They are under strict guidance and strict rules about what they can and can't do. So that's the route to go. And there was something else I wanted to say on that particular topic.
Was it like the retirement apps?
But yeah, that's
because I know that when you and I were chatting last, we were talking about, leveraging something like the Betterment app, where the concept is that there's adults out there, just like you were saying, where maybe they have money sitting in their savings account. It could be returning more each year if they were to do something else with it, but maybe those people aren't as financially educated, so they use a more user-friendly type of service through the app, such as Betterment, to transfer money into it. You have a couple options, but they keep it fairly user-friendly, and it's better than just a generic savings account. Is that maybe what you're thinking about?
Yeah. No, I remember what I was going to talk about, but let's just talk about what you were just saying there. So like they call those robo-advisors, and so I'm actually a big fan of them because they tend to have lower fees that they charge you. So for example, like a typical like having a financial advisor charge you 1 to 1.5% a year, which can add up, and if you actually put it into these calculators, you'll see how much it erodes your earnings over time, because fortunately or unfortunately, compounding takes a small problem and makes it a big problem. So when you talk about yanking out 1% from your returns every year, it has a significant impact over time. Which is why inflation, like everybody kind of got exposed to inflation for the first time recently. It's always been there. So it's with COVID and everything and all the stimulus checks and everything, everybody kind of got a realization because it grew so fast. And so, but typically like inflation is sitting around 2%. And so I'm giving an example because they're all kind of related. So 2% over time, like you don't really notice prices going up, you don't really pay attention, but then 20 years go by and then you're noticing like stuff has doubled in price. But that's why like everybody will say, oh, when I was a kid, gas was this much, or all I paid for ice cream was 25 cents, and it's like, it's like we all come up with these sayings that are really expressing, all they're doing is really expressing things in like a very human way of what inflation is, and we do this with a lot of things, but that's just an example of how much a small percent can impact over time, as you're talking about doubling prices and whatnot. And so the thing with the robo advisors is like if you can go from 1%, and these robo advisors, because you're not going to be talking to Bobby Joe that just graduated college and is giving you advice on your earnings over time, because you're not talking to them, they'll give you a lower rate, typically like 0.25% or so a quarter point, which is really good. It's a 1/4 of what you'd be paying with like a Fidelity or whatever if you were to have a financial advisor. And so that's great. And it will auto balance your money and move it over time and do all the movements for you. Now, if you really wanted to, and you wanted to be like, hands-on, then you don't do a robo advisor and you could do it yourself, like just opening up the standard Fidelity account or, E-Trade and start trading stocks. But then you got to pay attention to like asset classes and, but the mix that you want to have for your exposure at your age to this and
higher
that.
risk.
So, you
to
just
avoid that small
how much
pay.
How much time do you want to put into it?
Yeah.
Yeah, how much time do you want to put into this stuff, man? And so there's other ways of gaming it too. Like if you still like if you really wanted to, you could actually to robo-advisor for a small portion of your money and pay a very small percent, the 0.25, you pay it on a small balance, and then you have a separate account like at Fidelity or whatever, and you just mirror whatever the transactions they're doing in the market. But again, you got to do this. That means you got to go in like once a quarter and every 3 months and go in and go balance and sell and trade, which I don't know. I'm busy. I don't want to do that. And trust me, I love this stuff, but I don't want to. It's not the most exciting thing for me. So I'm willing to pay the 0.25% just to set it and forget it and just follow. And let me think higher level. Let me think about bigger strategies. I think the robo advisor is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I remember one of the main things that you and I would always chat about is it depends on how much bandwidth you have today or how hands-on you want to be today, right? But also it depends on what your goals are. So if in 5 years from now I want to buy a house versus 10 years from now, odds are I'm going to be playing with my money a little bit differently, correct?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly.
And I remember, not only, does it depend on what your goals are, but also, let's say, how old you are, right? Because time is a big factor as well. So me putting away, or someone putting away, $1,000 at age 20 is going to yield a lot more by the time they hit 60 compared to someone who's 30 years old putting $1,000 in and seeing how much it looks like when they're 60, correct? You mind walking through that or like what your 2 cents are on that?
Yeah, this kind of even just goes right back to the whole compounding thing. So, so all this stuff is kind of related, but it exposes itself in different ways and different concepts. But like this is something that I didn't really appreciate until I was older. But it's something where, like you said, like if I invest $1 when I'm 20 versus I invest $1 when I'm 40, that dollar is going to be a lot bigger when I retire. Because I give it so many more decades to compound compound over and over again. So it ends up being a lot bigger. So this is something I think you may remember is like when you guys are looking at buying a new car, and it's like, okay, if I buy a car, let's say I buy a $30,000 car myself, and you buy a $30,000 car, it's costing you more money because you're younger. And people don't think about this. They think about, I'm paying 30 grand, and here's, it is opportunity cost, but it's like the compound effect. So like if you spend 30 grand and you could have invested that 30 grand and had it compound for more time over time, by the time I hit 60 and by the time you hit 60, I will have, that 30 grand that I could have invested would have had less time to mature and gain value. So to me, it costs a lot less. And the way to do this is like you just use compound calculators, and you can kind of look at, hey, I put 30 grand. There's the tool I think I've told you about. Maybe you have it still. Let me just look at what the name is. I use it all the time. It's called Easy Calculators. It's on the iPhone. But what you do is you go in there and you go into a compound calculator and you type in your principal amount, like, 10 grand or 30 grand. And then you put in how much time do you want to go by? So you can put in like, let's say, 40 years. And then you say at what interest rate. So let's say you do like average market returns and you say 6% or so. And so you type that in and it will go out and calculate how much that 30 grand will be at the end of that 30 years. And so if you do that versus like, me will be less time till I hit 60. So I'll put in a smaller number, and you'll notice like how much that car is actually costing you. And that's why it's like, I think, as much as possible, what you want to do is delay bigger purchases. Depends what kind of purchase it is. If it's an investment, that's different. If it's like an expense kind of thing, like a car is not an investment. Maybe there are some exceptions to that if you're doing some kind of rare car, but if it's just like
something that grows over time versus really diminishes over time.
Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly. So exactly. So if you're doing that, then it's like if you can delay it until you're older, it will cost you less money And so it has a significant impact. And the same is true with like 401k investments or any kind of investment. So like if you can start investing earlier on, you will have to put less in there to get the same outcome later in life. So if you start, and this is why they say start as early as possible, you know, so ideally you'd want to start contributing to like an IRA or a Roth IRA when you're, you know, a child, you know, and so you know, in order to do that, you have to have earned income and so forth, but there's ways of gaming the system. You could be a model, or you could be a representative at your parents' work or something, and you get a small check or whatever. But as long as you have earned income, then you can start contributing to this early. And that means you have to contribute less in your life to get the same amount of money that I'm going to do because I started later in life, you know, so it's so important to do it as early as possible. So you see, it's like this effect is that it applies to both income and investing, but it also applies on the opposite side of expense, because expense could have been an investment, you know. So like when you're making choices, like when I see people having new iPhones, like I see people that shouldn't have new iPhones. Like, of course, people can afford new iPhones and so forth, but this is like $1,100 phone, and there's a lot cheaper phones out there, and people will buy that. And if you do, let's say somebody's upgrading to a new iPhone every year, that's $1,000 that they're investing every year into a new iPhone. And if you were to put that into one of these compound calculators and say, hey, let's start with $0, and I want to do $1,000 of investment once a year, and I want to do that over 30 years. Look at how much a damn new iPhone costs you. It's like, it's just stupid. So it's like every time, this is what I think about. So when I see people, like I see a kid with a new iPhone, I'm like, what the, like, they just don't even understand how much that phone is actually costing them. Yeah. So it's just and maybe that's how you have to think about money.
Yeah, and maybe, you know, decades down the road, they're going to really be kicking themselves for not having a flip phone, right? But I think that ties into, you know, it's funny because I feel like a lot of psychology and philosophy, and kind of tying into the overall, you know, theme of pursuing excellence and human nature in that sense. There's a common theme that you see across all these different topics around the value of delayed gratification, right? So if you think about, you know, delayed gratification, where I'm not going to eat this junk food in the moment, and over time I'm going to be fit, I'm going to feel healthier, all this stuff. In the moment, I could spend money on a new iPhone, or I could decide to put it into a savings account, and over time, I'm going to experience that benefit, right? So it ties into all this, you know, I mean, you can even bring that into social media. You can bring that into what you spend your time on, like a whole bunch of stuff where delayed gratification, those who can better manage it and channel it tend to experience those type of bigger, more fulfilling rewards. And those who can't manage it tend to find themselves kind of running into a lot of the same problems, or, you know, they want the quick and the fast, and that's not always good, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. So like I just did a quick calculation. I use that compound calculator I was telling you about on easy calculators. I put in $100 a month investment. So you're starting with zero, right? So imagine I have no investment in an iPhone. So, and if I do $100 a month, which is, you know, so every year I'm putting $1,200, 12 times 100, right? So that's $1,200 for the latest iPhone. And let's say I do the same thing. I do this for 30 years. So I do it from when I'm 20, let's say, until I'm 50 years old. So over that time, just by the time I hit 50, I would have paid over $100,000 on new iPhones.
Wow.
Now, in like out of pocket money, it would have only been 36 grand. That's all it would have been, like this is how people would think, because they'll go, oh, I only spent 36 grand, which is still a lot. But the money you would have made on investment return actually is bigger than the amount of money that came out of your pocket. And that's the thing, is like people don't think that way. They think, oh, I spent 36 grand. No, you didn't. You spent 36 grand plus the opportunity, the money you would have made off of that 36 grand, which in this case is 65 grand. So it's like almost double the amount that came out of your pocket. That's what people don't think about, is like oftentimes it's not the money you're spending that is the most expensive thing. It's the money that money could have made you that is the really big loss that people have. And the thing is ignorance is bliss. These people don't know. They have no idea what they're doing by the decisions they're making. So they don't think about it. They don't know it. Nobody's telling them, because we're not educating each other on this topic. So it's just like we're all going around just wasting money, and then, I don't know. It's just not a good thing.
Yeah, and it's funny because I feel like with the compounding effect, as well as the concept of credit, both the concept and credit itself, I feel like a lot of people that I've met that either have issues with credit or they've run into financial issues, they talk about, oh, well, when I was 18, I did XYZ, and I didn't know that I was supposed to have been doing this, and now I have crappy credit, or now it took a huge chunk out of my credit. Now I can't, be as attractive as a tenant, or a candidate to try to rent a home or, rent a lease and stuff like that. So I feel like, both the compounding effect and credit, I definitely agree, are major topics that aren't taught enough, and especially at those crucial ages of being like a young adult, which kind of makes me tie back to the whole, because, basically taking 10,000 steps back, because I feel like a lot of the people who are going to hopefully end up watching some of these videos are younger adults, people who are kind of just getting started in life. So like from your perspective, what would you say should be, or what would you be teaching? Let's say that. What would you be teaching if you were to create some personal finance curriculum for people who hit age 12, let's say?
Yeah, that's a pretty deep question and something I didn't prepare for. But like I would say that because there's a lot to it.
For sure.
It's not like you just simply teach stuff. And there's layers, and so there's concepts, especially if you go down to the age of 12. Like you definitely want to give these concepts as early as possible, but in something that's relevant. Like, what if people, like if you think about the closest we come to learning about finance, it's math in school. And if imagine when you have like a math problem on the board and you're learning about like multivariable equation, how to solve a multivariable equation. Like, you're like, dude, what do unless you're into math, you're like, why the hell do I need to learn this, dude? I mean, like, I don't ever see me using this in my life. But if you can find a way to relate it, because I promise you, I use multivariable, math not all the time, but quite often actually in my life. And I use a lot of math that, as like with finance stuff, I use it a lot. And I use it for other things as well. But if you can't relate it, so if I start talking about compounding in this, or if I talk about inflation, I probably learned about inflation when I was in school, but did I care? No. It's like, who cares?
You didn't know how to apply it.
And so, but it's like, well, what is the, you just never really, it never tasted real, so it was like, whatever, but it has a significant impact on a lot of things. Like, for example, like I always wanted to make 50 grand a year. That was my goal when I was a kid, was like, dude, if I could make 50 grand a year over 20 years, I'll make $1 million. Well, I mean, this is a young, ignorant kid, right? Because like, I'm like, dude, I'll be a millionaire. But of course, that doesn't include having to pay taxes. It doesn't include
rent,
like
food.
the impact of inflation over that. Oh, yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't account for a lot of stuff. So it was like completely ignorant, But it was kind of like and so if I look at that now and I said, hey, dude, I want to make 50 grand a year, you'd be like, dude, I mean, you make 50 grand a year without a degree, So it's so it's not, so this just kind of shows you like how naive, you could be when you're a kid and you don't really understand all of the things that go into, money. So what I would do is like, I would have like, layers of things, like just teaching about concepts and real applicable things, like, hey, you're going to the store and you're buying ice cream and your mom gave you $5, how, things like that. And you just teach basic concepts, but then you teach like concepts, like there's simple ways of teaching concepts like of compounding and whatnot, but you just constantly layer, just like you do with any other subject in school, where you have like, foundational stuff, and then you kind of move to more advanced learnings. But I would say even just having foundational steps, like have a personal finance class in school, like have it at least, start off with an elective. I don't know all the politics that goes into school curriculum, but have it at least start off as an elective, and of course, not a lot of people will pick it or want to pick it, but there will be people that are interested. And then make it a mandatory subject. Maybe it's just one time a year, or one semester a year, or one or maybe it's half a semester. I don't know, but you start you're wedging yourself into the actual curriculum and forcing people to actually learn these subjects because these are life skills. I
Yeah.
think I remember mechanics class when I was in school. How often do you think I use what I learned in there today? Not very
Not
often,
often.
especially if
Yeah.
especially if you're saving up and making money and stuff. You're not going to need that. So it's almost like planning for failure. Be terrible, so you have to work on your own car and like clean out the pistons. I mean that's like kind of what we're teaching, and then they would teach cooking and stuff, which is actually a good life skill. I suck at that, and I never took the class, but I suck at it. But I mean, good thing I can afford to pay for restaurant food and all that. But it's like if they're teaching that, why aren't they teaching personal finance? Like it's just kind of silly to me. So I think like just even having like basic foundational things and ways of looking at money, ways of thinking about interest. I can tell you so many times that like I'll ask somebody, oh, what kind of rate did you get on that car loan, or what kind of rate did you get on your house loan? And if somebody says I don't know, I'm like, how the heck don't you know? I mean, that's like an important, very important stat because it dictates how much money you're going to pay in interest and all that. And like to me, it's like you can ask me any of my loans, and I'll tell you exactly how much each of those are. And I obsess over them. I probably obsess over all that stuff too much, but you should at least know what interest rate you're paying. And if you're paying something like 19% or 20%, like I'm like, oh my God, and you carry a balance, like that's just crazy to
Getting
me.
duped.
But yeah, so I would definitely start with some like just basic exposure to the impact of interest rates and kind of like giving buckets of like classification, like, hey, these kind of interest rates are reserved for people that are actually, able to pay their bills on time and have good credit ratings. And like, if you're getting this kind of rate, like if you don't do well with managing your credit, this is what you can kind of expect. And here's the impact that has. Like if you were to
Yeah.
buy this car, again, make it all relatable and say, hey, this car, instead of costing you 20 grand, it's going to cost you 40 grand because of,
Yeah.
your bad decisions on finance and stuff. So it's like just kind of making it highly relatable, I think, is the first step. And then you can go on to more advanced curriculum and stuff that would be more optional. But I think
Yeah.
just getting the basics out there would help a lot.
Yeah, and I feel like, one of the main takeaways that I'm hearing is that there just needs to be more of a importance put on personal finance in general. So not only like, yes, there are a lot of concepts that should be taught in school or taught to younger adults, but I think right now, again, to your point, there's, mechanic class, there's cooking class, there's other items where probably the idea is to get, exposure to different, activities, different topics, I would bet is what the elective is for. But the way that I see it is, yes, that's important, but is it more important than understanding how to manage your finance? And I would argue no. So I feel like just as a culture, we should be emphasizing that understanding better and probably putting more of an emphasis towards the younger generation and trying to get them educated on it. Or else it's just generation after generation. People turn 18, they make horrible decisions, and all of a sudden they have really bad credit, and that just impacts the rest of their life, and they're always kind of looking back, man, I wish I didn't do that. Kind of like a bad tattoo that they got. So so that's interesting. I think
I mean, think think about like you growing up. Like, how often did your dad or mom sit down and talk to you about or like proactively teach you math or biology, or like like not like helping you with your homework. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like, hey Lee, let's sit down. I want to teach you some stuff about math and biology. But like parents don't do that. That's why they teach us in school.
yeah,
Now, how often do they talk to you about? How often do they sit down and go, hey Lee, let's learn about personal finance. Let's learn how to manage money. Nobody does. I mean, if you had a parent that did that, I mean, that's a freaking amazing. Like I would, like
yeah,
that's awesome. But the problem is, parents aren't doing it, and neither is the school. So nobody is teaching anybody about personal finance, and so you have to like take up your own interest in it,
yeah,
or like when you're in college, you pick like finance, but usually that's focused on business. It's not
yeah,
focused on personal finance. Like it's just a completely omitted field of study. And it's like, what the heck? Because this is the one common thing that we all have, man. Like, you're in sales and I'm in marketing. It's like, that has nothing, like, they're two different fields. I mean, highly related in this case, but that has nothing to do with it. We both make money and we both have to manage our own money. And yet nobody has taught us how to do that. We have to take the initiative to try to figure out what the best thing to do is, and hopefully surround ourselves with people that will give us good advice. But is that really what we're leaving it up to chance out there with all these people and all these neighbors? And I'm telling you, dude, there's so many smart people that I've worked with in my career that just suck, absolutely suck at money management, understanding what to do with money, understanding how to invest it for the future, understanding like basic, not to become like a super wealthy person, but just to have like something and know where you're headed. Like, I'm telling you, it sucks. It absolutely sucks with smart people too. So being intelligent has nothing to do with being good at money. It's two completely separate things.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny that you say that because, you know, I definitely was in that boat of like, you know, same as you. My parents never sat down and basically said, hey, here's some insight into personal finance. What I will say is, you know, my dad, I feel like, put a lot of emphasis on communication. And that's something that I was really happy about because communication is another thing, right? Like, even if your job is, you know, working behind the computer completely by yourself, you still have a boss, you still have to get hired, you still have to talk to some sort of recruiter to get hired, you still have to, whole bunch of stuff, right? So communication is incredibly important. And a lot of times, even if you look through social media and you see, you know, people arguing or, you know, people getting into fights or whatever, it's usually just poor communication and, I mean, overall, you know, irrationality. But I felt like, you know, personal finance is kind of similar to communication or critical thinking. I guess that one's kind of a more broad topic, but in that sense where, yeah, that probably it's not emphasized enough in my opinion, and it should be. So I think that's a good point.
Dude, I love it, man. Communication, even though it's not related to finance, it's like to your point. I mean, that's so huge. Like, it doesn't matter what role you're in. I mean, you hit on all the key points there. It's like, yeah, you need to be able to communicate, whether it's in written form or verbal. You know, it's like that's so important. The other thing, critical thinking, that's something else that has also been something that, you know, even though it has nothing to do with personal finance, but it's like, well, I guess it can, but it's like, that's something else that it's like, I mean, that's another one that just like, you know, I've had some really bad software engineers when I used to be in that field. And it's like, you know, and and at the time I was going to college and I was asking the professors, like I was going in and talking to like, you know, technical professors that, you know, maybe taught a course on programming or something. And I'd say, how do I teach somebody, you know, critical thinking, like how to actually think through a problem, not even code. I just want to teach them like how to think through, like, and I can still remember the example I gave them. You know, like the thing I would try to do is like, you don't even have to know how to code to understand this, but it's like, imagine, and this is what you do when you're coding, is like, imagine the problem of I'm driving up to a red light. And what are all the things that you do as you approach a red light, you know, or a green light, let's say. And so normally you go green light, you just go through the intersection, but that's not true. I mean, yeah, you could, but chances are you're gonna, you know, you might want to also glance left and glance right to make sure nobody's, you know, did the light just turn green? Maybe I want to check to make sure nobody's running through the red light. There's a lot of things. And so the thing about like critical thinking is you have to think, it's not just, you know, simplistic, like go, stop, it's go, but if this just turned green. And so it's going through that critical thinking process of outlining every step of the way that was in there, and then coming up with the exceptions and the, you know, all that. Anyway, it's another area that I think is definitely lacking in academics.
Yeah. And I feel like I feel like a good place to kind of wrap up would be, you know, what I'm trying to do with a lot of these videos is make the wisdom from who I'm speaking with digestible and easy for folks to take away, right? So if I'm trying to summarize some of the main takeaways from this conversation, it would be, one, regardless of who you are, how old you are, you should invest in trying to learn personal finance, get better educated on personal finance, talk to people who may know about personal finance or just how that works. YouTube, you can learn an absurd amount of stuff on YouTube if you take the time and you have the curiosity. So almost, not only getting better educated on it, but getting better educated on the consequences of not operating well with personal finance. And even, a second takeaway, putting it more into practice would be, trying to find someone who may not necessarily have a stake in your finances if you're asking them for personal or for asking them for financial advice. So example would be, if I want to know what I should do with this $1,000, maybe I don't want to go to someone who is trying to make a profit off of me to pick what I'm going to do with that $1,000. Maybe I go to a cousin or someone, a neighbor, or someone who, a mentor, or someone at your church, let's say, who may know a thing or two. And then I feel like the last takeaway as well is, just as a culture, I think it should be emphasized a lot more. Hopefully we see it someday get put, into the schools or into, high school, at least some sort of elective program. But, I think those are all good points. Anything you would add there, or feel like, oh crap, this, I would also want to share that.
Yeah, there's so many topics to talk about in this area that we didn't even get to. But it's just so much to talk about, and it's overwhelming too. But I think you hit on the key points. I think I guess out of the stuff we talked about, one of the easiest, like our last talk, I always look for those easy takeaways, like just an easy way to identify things. I would, like the one you talked about that I like a lot, which is, again, I would want you to learn so much more, but that key thing, if you're taking financial advice, like you said, like just make sure that they don't have some kind of interest in, like they don't have an outcome, they don't share in the outcome of your decision. Like, so if somebody says, hey, Lee, you're my buddy and I'm selling life insurance now, and I think, you should get life insurance. Well, it's like, and they're the ones selling it to me. Well, did they do it because they really think I need life insurance? Or are they doing it because life insurance comes with a high commission, that they're getting? And so if they're going to recommend life insurance and you're a buddy of mine, then I'll go buy it through an independent party, because you just want to keep, somebody that's trying to help you out with your money. It's like, just make sure that they don't benefit from it, just to kind of keep the two things separate. Not that you don't trust that person. It's just like, have that be something that you just are always doing when it comes to your money. Just make sure that the people giving you advice aren't benefiting from the advice that they're giving. Yeah.
Love it. And of course, like, I think as you said, the topic of finance is no ceiling whatsoever. So I think it'd be awesome if, we could do additional calls related to finance, or maybe if certain topics come up that we're both think, oh, that'd be kind of cool to talk about. We'll add that to the agenda of future discussions. But I think this was
awesome. Are you available tomorrow? Let's start.
Let me block off like 6 hours. We'll talk about compounding interest. We'll build some curriculums for schools. All right. Awesome. Well, appreciate it, man. Appreciate your time as always. And I hope you have a good one.
All right. See you, man.
Sometimes